Today I'm going to go over an Obsidian Flames tier list. We're going over every single deck I could think of. I'm going to rate them as fairly as possible. So I have all my tiers from S to F. I think I have like 37 decks here, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. I'm going to put TCG Reversal Guardy. This deck is really just worse in just about every way than regular Guardy. And then now we have Charizard, which makes Mewtwo Reunion even worse. I mean, it still is Guardy, so you can't be really that bad. I think it's probably C tier, but like it would probably be higher up if regular Guardy wasn't such a good deck. Okay, so Lugia single strike build, that's an A tier deck. It's one of the best decks in standard format right now, and there's not anything coming out in Obsidian Flames that would change that. Okay, then the other Lugia build, it's a C tier deck just because Duraludon exists, and as long as Duraludon is super relevant, then there's really no reason to ever play the colorless build. DT Emu, it's like the worst build of Fusion Strike, but it's still okay. I think it's okay. I think we need to do this, and I think it's better than Lugia colorless, but I think it's still. I could definitely see bumping up to B tier. I think it's near the top of C tier. It's an alright deck, but Spiritomb sort of weighs it down a little bit. Goodra is D tier. Too many one-shot decks in format, and yeah, that's just really a recipe for disaster for Goodra. Turbo LZ is an A tier deck. It's better than Lugia. It's just one of the best builds of Lost. It's probably the best build of Lost right now because unlike some other ones like the Kyogre and Charizard, you actually go aggressively and can put your things on your board to play around Iono, and then you just have all sorts of different awesome attackers to push everything for weakness. You're aggressive. So then it's like Kyogre is like very similar to Turbo, and I think you could like like the Kyogre package, it's just sort of hindered because Iono exists. It's hard to assemble all those combo of cards when Iono exists. I mean, it's still Lost in Box. It's still basically Turbo, so I think it's a B tier deck. Those are just very similar archetypes. Lost Tina is another very good deck. It's probably worse than Lugia overall. It's just a very good pick overall right now, and I don't think that really changed much for Obsidian Flames. I think Obsidian Flames is a relatively weaker set. There are a few new impact cards, but overall, there's not a whole lot that just drastically changes the metagame. There's no brand new archetype that like really shifts things a lot. So Radiant Charizard, I think it's a C tier deck. Just it gets hit hard by Iono, all the Lost City and formats, and now it has the new League HQ to mess around with. So I want to try the Solrock and Lunatone package in Sablezard, but I'm still afraid that like. Why would you ever play the Charizard build when Turbo, Tina, and Kyogre are all just so much better? Alright. So Chin-Pao Palkia, it's a B tier deck. I like Chin-Pao. And like I say B tier for like tier 1.5 or something like that, like if we were actually to talk about that. But Chin-Pao Palkia is nice because you have all sorts of different attackers, Starmie, Palkia, Chin-Pao, and you just have a ton of different options. And Palkia V-Star is still a very good attacker, attacking with it on turn 2, and you still have the damage ceiling of Chin-Pao. You have a lot of different versatile things, and you don't have to worry about finding those rare candies in the early game. So I quite like this build. I think these two builds are very similar, and they're probably in the same tier, whereas like the Chin-Pao Excalibur deck is much easier to keep chaining one-shots, versus this one is more of a better all-around build. You're playing Lost Cities, and can probably contend with those single pricers better. I think both of them are solid right now. Both of them are definitely in D tier. Dialga, F tier. Not a whole lot to say about it. It's just a pile. You can get some highlight reel moments with Star Kronos every now and again, but not really a whole lot of merit to it right now. Regis is probably F tier as well. It was very good for a while. Then rotation really ruined it. I mean, it's going to take like these EXs in format really make things hard for Regis, because like you're having to 2-shot or 3-shot Gardevoir, and they have Iono. There's lots of collapsed in format, lots of Lost City in format, so really life's very difficult for the Regis right now. Urshifu, oh man, it's either a B tier, like very very top of B tier, which I think is where I'm gonna put it, or it's like very bottom of A tier. Urshifu did just come off that big win at NAIC. It's probably kind of a pretty good showing at Worlds. But I just like still, I can't really wrap my head around taking, I mean, okay, having a very favorable Guardy, a very favorable Lost Zone is obviously very good. taking an auto loss to Lugia and Mew is not so good. It probably is one of those spotty matchup spreads on this list, and I probably will have a favorite Charizard, which will help its case. So I think you probably can put it in A tier, and I wouldn't be upset about it. It's just a very odd archetype. It's gonna be very dependent on predicting the meta correctly. Charizard, it's another. Okay, I think Charizard is going to be a decent deck. I don't really. I was like, you are going to have to deal with the early pressure of Lost Zone, and you have quite a few different attackers you can use to help you get through that. And you have all sorts of different options. You can be playing with Arceus, with Pidgeot, you can use Entei, you can use Delphox, you can use Heatmore. There's so many different things you can use with it. So I think once the perfect Charizard list gets nailed down, I think it will be a pretty good deck. I just think initially it'll probably seem like a B to C tier deck, just because people will be experimenting with it. People will have some suboptimal lists, and it will seem very bad. But I think once the perfect Zard 60 gets nailed down, it will be an A tier deck. Shadow Rider, I think it's like top of D tier. It was probably an F tier deck previously. I mean, you probably could bump it up into C tier if you really wanted to, because the new Solrock and Lunatone are actually pretty awesome for the deck, because you can play Path to the Peak, and they'll Solrock and Lunatone make it so you Lunatone, if you have Solrock in play, makes it so all stadiums don't do anything to your Pokemon. So then you can use the old Solrock and Pokemon Go and accelerate to your Lunatone and shut off Path to the Peak. So you can be like a Calyrex Path deck and have Iono. I think it'd be a lot better if Guardy was in the format. I mean, you have Shadow Mist, so you can deal with the different Mew decks. You're probably still too slow to really do something, but I think it probably is actually valuable, which is pretty cool. Zorobox, probably B tier. I want Zorobox to be better, but as long as these decks, Lost Zone, are near the top, or Shifu as well, it's hard to really imagine Zorobox succeeding. Gengar had its shining moment, but I'm pretty sure it's still an F tier deck, honestly, especially with Charizard. A better dark type deck around, just Gengar. Alright, we'd have a really filling out the F tier. Zoroark's down there too, not a whole lot to add to that. Zoroark hasn't been good in ages. Tinglu is a C tier deck. I think better than Colossus Lugia and Guardy, but worse than DT Mew. I think the Tinglu might have a new, might have something new to play around with the new Gita card, because it doesn't necessarily need to be attacking early on, it just really needs its energy acceleration. But still, Tinglu is just pretty slow, pretty clunky, and it's hard to really imagine just Gita changing that. Like, the ability is very strong, no one's going to deny that, but actually getting it so it's attacking, because the ability, yeah, it's very strong, but if you're not applying pressure, then eventually your opponent will be able to crawl out of that lock and be able to start doing things. So, Tinglu, it's going to need some energy, like some consistent energy acceleration before it really starts to jump into consideration. I think Wings is probably a C tier deck. It's, yeah, Szymanski had that cool result at NEIC. Taking the auto L to all these Lost Zone decks and to Arceus decks is pretty bad. So I think you probably could bump it down here, but you have a great Guardy, a great Lugia. It's probably it's better than Radiant Charizard. It's better than Reversal Guardy. It's better than Colorless Lugia though. So that's kind of where it stops. Tinkaton I think is near the top, or just it's somewhere here in D tier. Another one of those decks that would be a lot better if Lost Zone was gone. Can hit big damage, just doesn't really have any great single prizes it can utilize, so it just gets bullied by the top of the food chain single prizers. Snorlax Control, unfortunately, is not very good. I'd like it to be better as someone who enjoys playing Control. There's like a few new cards like Cloth, Absol, that maybe Control can utilize, but I'm still just like, this meta is so wide open. Like, there's this many A tier decks, and there's more coming here. There's a lot more to come. It's hard for Control to be able to tech and prepare for all these decks, and whilst also being able to consistently set up every time. Revavroom, I think Revavroom is going to be pretty bad, honestly, initially. I think it's probably, I'll just generously put it in D tier, but without energy acceleration, it's probably an F tier deck, honestly. Guardy is S tier. Alright. Toadscruel, I think Toadscruel's probably C tier. It's probably low C to D. I'll put it here. Just being a Fortress deck sort of sucks, because yes, you can put your energies everywhere, but going down 2 prizes is really bad. And you don't probably want to be like being a Fortress deck. Like, the thought is like, okay, I Fortress and I own a Path, but Path is very anti-synergistic with what you're trying to do, especially because your opponent can Path you first. And then the Cherrim engine is just really clunky because you have to be able to Cherrim onto a Toedscool before you evolve it. So it's probably gonna be too clunky, and probably where Toedscool is best to be utilized, I think it's probably alongside Arceus somewhere. But on its own, I can't really see it being. C is probably too generous for it being by itself. Cheetar is probably a D tier deck. It's going to be fun being able to one-shot Pokemon for its 2 energies, but you're going to have a pretty rough time getting through multi-prizers. If you probably can trade well enough into like Lugia, into Palkia, into some of these other V-Star decks, but like once you start facing Guardian, they have single prizes that can one-shot you, things are going to start to fall apart. Fusion Mew, I think, is better than Tina, but worse than these other, yeah, it's worse than these other 2. Fusion Mew just has the aggression, has the disruption, and the fusion energies really help it out to deal with those Spiritombs. Our Archdrago is probably C tier. I think it probably belongs something like here. It's a nice way to play Arceus, but you look at all the other ones down here, and then you realize, why would I ever play Regidrago? Arcdura is definitely A tier. Yeah, I think it's near the top of A tier. I think it's one of the best decks in the format right now. And I think Umbreon, sort of in a similar fashion, is up there too. Just, you have, I mean, these are sort of the same deck. I know Katron did top 8 NAIC with like an Umbreon Flying Pika deck. But they are definitely some of the best decks right now. You're super tanky. You have 2-shot options. You hit good weaknesses. You have the disruption. I think also Arctina would be up here. I'll put it just below. I think it's just below Lost Tina. Our Gyarados, my personal pet deck. I think it's pretty good. Just to say I'm not biased, I'll put it up here in C tier, top of C tier. If this was like full my opinion, I'd probably throw it up here in B, right above Kyogre. I think the deck is pretty underrated right now, honestly, and I don't know how that translates to Obsidian Flames, because Charizard might be a pretty tough thing to deal with. Like, you do have Path, Hand Disruption, but they have some, they can build into one-shots late in the game and don't necessarily care about your energy denial. So the deck might need to be adapted a little bit, but I think it still should be okay. And as long as there's other Arc builds near the top, this deck just has such a great time into other Arceus decks. Arc Flying Pika, Flying Pika is great at dealing with Chin-Pao, specifically the Chin-Pao Excalibur build. Specifically the Chin-Pao Palkia build, where you can hit the Palkias for weakness and you can shut off all their basic attackers. And it's like sort of good against Lost Box if you can get that solo Flying Pika, but also it's sort of not. It's like weird. I think it's probably a C tier deck, probably right alongside Arceus Gyarados. It's okay. We did see it top 8 NAIC alongside Umbreon, but I think these other Arc builds are just better. Glimmora, I think, is probably okay. I think Glimmora isn't actually that horrible. I think it's probably somewhere here in C tier. Also, it seems okay. Being able to limit your opponent to 3 bench Pokemon is awesome. You maybe can combine it with Urshifu to take some extra prizes. Just like the decks that don't care about their bench size, or decks that this can set up regardless, your damage output is very low, so if your opponent can set up, it's going to start to fall apart for you. It seems okay. This definitely, I think if there's a good list that comes out, maybe this jumps up because the ability is very good, but I'll just sort of put it in C tier for now. And we have Arc Vulpix. I think it's probably the worst build of Arceus that we have on this list. Like, even worse than Arc Drago. I think it's probably like in here somewhere. Vulpix seemed very good going into NAIC, but pretty much every deck has an answer for it. Maybe Guardian's cutting Spiritomb, but it doesn't really do much against other Arceus Duraludon builds. Lost Zone has Dragonite that can one-shot it. Chin-Pao, I'm sort of gonna be messed up by it, but the Palkia build can have Starmie. This build is definitely a lot more hindered by it, so they have to like use cross switches and things like that to get around it. Vulpix can do some things, it's just that it doesn't do enough right now to really be warranted over some of these other Arceus partners. And finally, Vespiquen. I think this deck's gonna be pretty bad too. I'll just sort of generously put it alongside Revavroom. Being able to spread damage counters is objectively pretty good, but the energy acceleration is what leaves this sort of what makes this card not so good, because we have Chairman Fortress, just like Toedscool, to accelerate grass energies, But having to use Cherrim presents its own set of challenges because you cannot accelerate the energies onto a Rulebox Pokemon, and then Fortress going down 2 prices is just never a good, just like not a good thing to be doing most of the time. And also things are just so big that like an Arceus deck isn't gonna care if you're spreading damage counters on them. Like you have to get this going very quickly for it to be a serious threat. Like once your opponent's not fully evolved up yet, which might be okay if you can set it up fast enough, but I don't think the deck is probably going to be able to be set up fast enough. So yeah, this is what I have for you guys today. I'm sure some of the things could be slid up and down within the tiers, or maybe these bottom or top ones be slid up or down some way or another. But what do you think of my tier list? I'll link the tier list in the description below if you want to make one of your own. And if you want to, you can join my Discord and send me a picture of your tier list. I'd be more than happy to see what you think of what the Obsidian Flames metagame is going to look like. So thank you guys for watching. Subscribe if you're new and you enjoy this kind of content, and I'll catch you in the next one.